Hi, my name is Gabriel Gutierrez, and I will be reporting on the Nuer tribe in South Sudan. Starting with gender identity, in her article, Return of the Displaced Nuer in South Sudan, Women Becoming Men, Kartiana Grabska discusses her research of the Nuer returning to South Sudan after civil war and the exchange in gender roles as the Nuer returnees return and reestablish themselves. Grabska describes how the economic environment has changed and how this affects lives of those returning. When I was young, we relied on cattle and cultivating land. Money had no value at a time, and our lives were about cattle. This was before government. Now after government war, lives in Nuer have changed completely, said Nigeria, a Nuer woman on page 11 of Grabska's article. In the emerging, money-dominated economy, women recognized that they needed to make a financial contribution to the household and increase their autonomy. It became necessary for women to begin working to earn money for the household in addition to men. This is similar to Chapter 35 of Conformity and Conflict, Global Women in the New Economy, which describes women from third world countries who leave their homes for jobs as caretakers in wealthier countries. These women leave their families in the care of another woman, often a relative, and send money back home. Gender roles have changed, as women now must also go into the workforce in order to support their families and are no longer expected to stay home and care for the home and children. Moving on to talk about ritual, in his article Ritual Formation of Peaceful Publics, Sacrifice and Syncretism in South Sudan, Ross Kane discusses how ritual helped in the peacemaking between rival Nuer and Dinka tribes. During a peace dialogue held in 1999 between Dinka and Nuer of South Sudan, a chief addressed the crowd regarding the significance of their Mabiar, or white bull, ritual sacrifice. "You Dinka and Nuer," he says, "I caution you to be very careful of what you have observed in Mabiar. Mabiar will take revenge on anyone who receives these conflicts. Mabiar died in our reconciliation." As the opening event of peace conference, the ritual made possible subsequent dialogues for peace, said Kane. Because both groups had this ritual in common, it was able to bring them together in their peacemaking with dialogue, confession, and restitution, explains Kane in his article Through Stories of the Ritual. The importance of the ritual in bringing people together and reminding them what is important can also be seen in the Hmong culture, whose rituals and customs have kept them strong and unified through all that has come their way, as illustrated in Anne Fadiman's book. Talking about refugees, in Stephen Fox and Mary Will's Mental Health Assessment for Nuer Refugees from Sudan, they bring attention to the culture shock and adaptations to a new world from the Nuer. Written on page 162, Fox notes the so-called Lost Boys comprise a special subgroup of Sudanese refugees who have typically experienced a greater degree of exposure to trauma events compared to other refugees from Sudan. This brings light to the mental and psychological aspects of relocation compared to previous experiences. McCurdy parallels with an insider quote, "Still weak in English, he struggles to recall the multiple choice response sequenced as he memorized to pass the exam in the stressful but less painful American rite of passage into adulthood, chapter 34, page 317. Taking into consideration the learning aspect of the new culture, these refugees have to adapt in currency, from livestock to money, and being able to obtain health care as well as an education. Their static lives have become more dynamic, from a humble pastoral setting to a self-sufficient, individualistic, technology-filled culture." Moving on to kinship, in Evans-Pritchard's article, Kinship and Marriage Among the Nuer, Evans writes on page 43, "The Nuer say that marriage to persons standing in certain relationships is forbidden because it would be rule incestuous. While the Nuer, similarly to us, view marriage to relatives as incestuous, many other cultures view this as normal or even customary. For example, in Chapter 18 of Conformity and Conflict, Family and Kinship in Village, India, McCurdy addresses the structure of arranged marriages and kinship within the Radikoti, an Indian village, neighboring tribes, to keep the family name going. While some may view this as incestuous, the Radikote see this as a means of expanding their clan at all costs. This view is different than what we are used to, but keeping an open mind is key to becoming an insider and seeing a whole other view of life from another's aspect." Concluding with disease, in the article Foot and Mouth Disease Vaccinations in South Sudan, Barasa et al. Illustrate the growing problem of cattle diseases amongst tribes such as the Nuer and the Dinka in which cattle milk is a necessity. The Nuer agropastoralists, a group known for their livestock and agriculture, endure a hunger cap, a time frame from June to August each year when crops such as maize and sorghum have yet to ripen. During this time, the Nuer rely heavily on milk production from their cattle. Among the Nuer agropastoralists, milk accounts for 50% of the total energy intake, states Barasa et al. In their article on page 341. Cattle diseases such as rinderpest and foot and mouth hinder milk production for up to 4 weeks as this microbe shuts down the milk glands. Because milk is paramount to the Nuer's survival, it is detrimental to their food supply when cattle contract diseases. Paralleling in Sproudy and McCurdy's book, Conformity and Conflict, Chapter 11 highlights microbes and diseases transmitted from animals to humans. Rinderpest not only affects the Nuer's food supply, but has high potential to infect humans in close contact with a strain known as measles. Without solving the hunger or health problem the disease brings, losses to the tribe are prevalent. Studying the Nuer's anthropology has been an eye-opening experience. Thank you for listening to my presentation.